Robin, good evening. Robin, can you hear us? Your camera is blank.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, can hear you now.
Yeah, I'm having lots of technical difficulties. I'll work on it while we go.
Okay. Friends, I called this meeting, the regular meeting of the Policing Advisory Commission of Montgomery County to order. It's 6:32 p.m. Monday, November 14. We have a quorum of 5. And we have our first item of business was to welcome a new appointee to the commission, Christina Delane, but I don't see Christina Delane with us yet. I will wait just a couple more moments then to see if she joins us or if there are other commissioners who'll be able to join us.
Okay, I've been emailing her all day today, and I don't see anything about her or anybody else having any trouble signing in, but I'll keep an eye out.
Thank you. I also saw a communication from Carolyn Fredrickson that she is planning to resign. I didn't see that there was an effective date of her proposed resignation. Has she been was she going to resign this evening? Was she resigning as of that letter?
I took it to be her resignation letter, but I can reach back out to her to clarify.
Okay, because it was in the future tense. It wasn't I hereby resign. So I didn't know quite what to make of it. What I'm, in the absence of other people joining it being 6:34 and honoring those who've joined, the friends should know that our proposed agenda this evening included hearing from the state's attorney's office regarding their MOU with Howard County in the prosecution of police-involved homicides. And there were other questions that we had sent to them last summer when we hoped that they would be able to help give us insight into their relationship with the Montgomery County Police Department. They notified Susan today that they would not be able to send someone to join us this evening. So the only item on our agenda then is an election, because we currently do not have a vice chair, and our chair has taken a leave of absence, Sherry Branson, to serve as an interim member of the Planning Commission. The county's Planning Commission had resigned en masse a few weeks ago, and new members were appointed. Sherry was one of them, and it's initially an interim appointment. It potentially could be a permanent appointment. I regret I haven't spoken with her about what the likelihood of that is. But that means, therefore, that we need to elect officers. I have spoken with Ty McKinney, and Ty expressed a willingness to serve as vice chair if I serve as chair. And I wrote to some of you to indicate that was a fit. What I'm going to do is to ask for nominations for chair to be open. We will then vote on chair, and then we'll ask for nominations for vice chair, and we'll vote on vice chair. And
Mr. Chair, I move that Eric Sterling be appointed chair or elected chair of the Police Advisory Commission.
Okay, so that's one nomination.
I second that.
Well, okay, nominations don't need to be seconded.
Okay, well, we got it anyway.
I move that the nominations be closed on said name.
I second that.
Well, we could first ask if there are any other
Yeah,
nominations
okay.
before we, hearing none, the question occurs on the motion of Mr. Ricks to close the nominations. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The nominations are closed. I'm going to interrupt now because I see that Christina Delane is beginning to sign on. And it's, as the newest member, it's important that we welcome her and bring her up to date. So Christina, as soon as you are able to tell us that you're able to hear and participate, we'd like to welcome you.
Great, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Christina, thank you very much. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your interest in this work?
Sure. So I am a lawyer here in Montgomery County, and I've been here for about 10 years. And I have had my fair share of exposure to the policing community, and that's whether when I was a teacher or in the practice of law, in volunteer work. And I just felt like I had done everything that I could up until this point. So this opportunity just allows me to extend further and serving the community in this area.
Well, we're really glad you joined us. What kind of law have you practiced?
Family law, and I'm a general practitioner, so I can do pretty much anything, but I stop at felonies pretty much, so.
So in other words, you do minor criminal cases, but you don't do felony cases. Is that?
I have steered away from them.
Okay, well, very good. And I see that Ruhama Endashaw has also joined us. Ruhama, do you want to say good evening?
Yes, I was typing in the chat, but I didn't want to interrupt. I'm so sorry. First of all, my camera hasn't been working for the past few weeks. But yeah, I'm very excited to work with you. Thank you so much for your introduction. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. So to bring Christina and Ruhama up to date, our current chair, Sherry Branson, has taken a leave of absence, and so we're without officers. And we had begun the process of electing officers. We had we're about to have an election for chair, and we had just, I was nominated by Vernon Ricks. We had just, before you joined, voted to close the nominations for chair. I want to make sure that Christina and Ruhama, you have an opportunity if you want to participate in nominations to have that, notwithstanding the motion having passed. I'd like to ask unanimous consent that we reopen the nomination possibility so that Christina and Ruhama can fully participate in the election of chair.
Well, Mr. Chair, I don't think that would be proper. We have, in fact, elected you to be chair.
Well, no, we haven't. We've only nominated me. We have not had the vote.
I thought we
But
voted. At least I thought we voted.
No, I'm sorry. We voted to close nominations. We did not vote on the chair.
Then I call the question on the chair, or to vote on the chair.
Okay, Mr. Ricks, I appreciate your desire for regular order. We will move ahead, and the question then is to vote. There's only one nominee to be chair, and those who you could, so obviously you could also vote to abstain. But so if people want to record in the chat their vote for me as chair, why don't we do it that way? So,
Hold on, I've got a question about the voting.
Captain Flynn, go ahead.
Yeah, so it was my understanding that for the commission, only members of the commission could be voting members. So that's why, like, I'm not saying anything, but I'm just confirming when you're asking for the vote, it's only the people that are existing members of the commission that are nominating and voting. Everyone else is just kind of a guest to the meeting, right?
Captain Flynn, you're correct. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Appreciate
I see 3 votes recorded in the chat of the 7 members present.
So just for clarification, are we voting to,
We're voting for
Close.
chair, right? So right now, we're voting for chair. There's one
Okay.
nominee, that's me.
okay,
I believe everyone has voted. It looks like the vote is, I got 7 votes out of the 7 members present. I thank you all for putting your trust in me, moving forward. It's now in order to open nominations for vice chair, and I'd like to nominate Ty McKinney.
I second that.
Are there other nominations for vice chair?
I move the nominations be closed on said name.
Is there a second to the motion to close the? Lori seconds. All those in favor of the motion to close nominations, say aye.
Aye.
The motion passes. So we're now voting on Ty to serve as vice chair. Type the name of your candidate for vice chair in the chat. I count 7 votes out of the 7 members present for Ty as vice chair. Ty, congratulations. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and also I wanted to thank each and every one of the commission members for your vote and trust, and I'll do the very best job that I can.
I'd like to say congratulations to both persons who have stepped up to leadership, and thank you very much for your service.
Thank you, Vernon. What I'd like to propose is that, and I'd communicated with Ty about this earlier. Ty and other members of the PAC were able to go to the Maryland State Police headquarters on last week, I think Thursday.
Yes.
Would you be willing to take a few minutes to tell us about what you learned?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the things that I've noticed personally, and I will say right now, what I'm saying reflects only my opinion. It does not reflect the opinion of Lori or Jen, who also attended. And it was one of the things that I thought about long and hard through the many meetings that we've had. And what I discovered was there were really 3 germane issues that were relative to policing in Montgomery County that this commission really needed to address. And those issues were de-escalation, mental health, and implicit bias. And of course, with those 3 issues, there is some bleed over. So one of the things that we're looking for in Montgomery County, I would think, is 21st century policing. And if we're looking for 21st century policing, then we certainly should be looking at 21st century methods of policing. And right now we have several police departments in Maryland, Virginia, and many other states who are using this Apex virtual reality training system for their police officers. Now, it doesn't mean that the Apex system is the magic bullet for everything, but it is a system that can be utilized to enhance the training, to maybe provide our police officers with some of the training that's absent right now in terms of it being mostly classroom instruction. Now, those of you who attended the Citizens Training Academy, at the very end of that training, there were some live scenarios that they took us through. And that's one of the areas that I think is very good anytime you're doing live scenarios, but I think this particular system will allow us more flexibility in terms of being able to create different scenarios so that these scenarios are not constantly repeated and become so commonplace that the officers know what to expect when they go into this training. Having worked at an academy before, that was one of the challenges that we had, was trying to make sure that the scenarios were diverse enough where they could not be passed on through general conversations and things like that. So you would get a true representation of how an officer would respond in a given circumstance. Now, with those things said, de-escalation being very big, mental health, and implicit bias, some of the pros of the system is that it is said to improve the retention of those who participate. And just like live-based scenarios, we tend to be visual. So we tend to remember more that we experience through visual experience than we do through maybe a classroom setting or instruction where we're just listening to commentary and we're not really physically involved. Matter of fact, when we're in classroom instruction, it always provides the opportunity to somewhat tune out, if you will. When you're doing live scenarios and you're involved, then obviously you have to remain alert to whatever's going on around you. It also provides realistic and scalable, and they're saying scalable in terms of data collection that would allow them to be able to make an assessment as to whether or not they believe a particular officer is responding to the training in the way that the police department would like. After speaking with Sergeant Brazil, who was our host for this training, I was told that once the scenario training is complete, there is a debrief. And the debrief, what they do is they go over everything that the officer did, either positive or negative, because what they're trying to do is assess whether or not, what is the officer's thinking in a given circumstance. And each and every one of us think differently because we've had different experiences. So part of something which may seem wrong, for example, in a given scenario, once you identify what the particular officer was thinking, which was germane to their response, that may change the outlook or the evaluation of whether or not it was a pass or fail situation. Now, I was told that there was nothing going to be done with this system that was going to eliminate an officer from becoming an officer, but it's to be used as a training tool. In other words, it is not an either or situation. It is a this and that kind of situation, rather than just saying, okay, we're going to have one methodology of training. So I think that's something that we should be aware of. It also allows for, which is quite significant, the change of ethnicity of the subject or suspect. So if you encounter someone, say, for example, with a mental health issue, that person could be Black, white, Asian, or whatever. They could change the ethnicity in order to see how a particular officer responds to that person. I think that's very key because obviously we live in a society of various ethnicities and we don't know whether or not there is consistency in response, or is it based on, you know, racial makeup. So that's one of the issues that is present. It also utilizes artificial intelligence. The system itself gauges the scenarios that are ran, and then through the mechanisms that are designed within the system itself, it can create suggestions of systems that could be used in a similar manner. In other words, they're saying that they have anywhere from 10,000 to 100,000 different types of scenarios that they can place people in, be it a domestic scenario, be it someone dealing with a mental health issue, be it a traffic stop, which we witnessed. Now, when you can do that, because when we talked about the system, we talked about a cost analysis. Is it cost effective? Because most things can be fantastic, but then you start thinking, are they affordable? And so one of the things that I thought about was that maybe it can serve as a possible replacement of some of the human being involved scenarios that they've created. And maybe that would lessen some of the cost and make it more cost effective, because then you're not compensating people to be there and present during training for police officers. You only need the manpower that's necessary to run the program. The program is a computerized program or tablet, just like we're accustomed to. And basically what happens is the officer dons a vest that communicates directly with the computer. So the thing that you see once the officer dons the vest, and if you took a look at some of the pictures that Susan sent out, then they showed where you can actually see the officer moving in the scenario and addressing the subject. The only drawback that it had was that you can't see the officer's hands usage unless the officer has their weapon in their hand. And that lets you know at that point where the officer's hands are. Once the officer holsters up, you can see that in some of the pictures, then it looks as if that the weapon is holstered and the officer is just communicating with whatever suspect they may be communicating with. Now, one of the advantages of that is that the training officer can adjust the scenario in terms of what he or she says to the officer who is being trained based on their response. So in that, you're not getting a constant regurgitation of the same thing over and over and over. If an officer becomes too aggressive in a scenario, then the training agent through the computer system can respond to that officer in kind in terms of what that may provoke from a subject. Now, going through the process, it would only take the officer up to the moment where the officer actually placed the person in handcuffs or called for medical treatment. And beyond that, the system is not equipped to actually demonstrate that. But I think for the purposes that we're talking about, I think that what we need to know in terms of the officer's response will have already been identified by the time it gets to that point. So I don't know, that may be more critical for the department itself in an evaluation, more so than it is what we're looking at in terms of the three issues that identified: de-escalation, implicit bias, and mental health. Now, one of the cons of it is we had, matter of fact, you'll be interested in this, Captain Flynn, we had 3 of your training officers from Montgomery County that went through this process with us to take an overview look at this system. I think Brendan Johnston was one of the ones there. And having conversations with them, they were trying to figure out logistically how they would be able to run the system where they could maximize the number of officers that they could get through in a given amount of time. I know when you're talking about training officers, one of the things that's most germane is how fastly you can get them adequately trained so that they can be placed on the street and become operational. So that was one of their concerns, but I don't think that's an impediment to the system. In fact, the feedback that we got from the Maryland State Police, who was our host, is that not only that they have that system, but they had bought additional systems and that they were seeking to place a system at each and every one of their jurisdictional or regional locations where that training would be more accessible across the state. So that's quite an investment, and it's quite an acknowledgement of that particular system and how they feel it is it is enhancing the training of their police officers. I know that, you know, Lori is a data collector, and I know Jen, who's not here tonight, unfortunately, deals with issues of mental health. So I would certainly be interested when I conclude hearing from Lori regarding data collection, because at some point we were in, you know, several different little groups and we were speaking about the system. So Lori and Jen may have picked up some things that I did not about the system. Now, I plan on taking a look in a similar way at some of the other systems that are on the market to do a comparison and to see how those other systems may work and be applicable to what we're doing as well. I would suggest that once we finish today, that at some point, at least by the time we meet again, is that those commissioners who attended would put in writing what their thoughts are on the system, both pro and con. And then we can compile that information and put it in some type of you know, coherent written form so that we can get a good assessment, especially for those members who haven't been able to attend. Maybe they can read that information and make a determination or ask questions from that as to whether or not they will support or not support such a system. Right now, I'm going to ask Lori.
Ty,
her
Ty,
I'm
can
sorry.
Before we get to the other part of the data piece,
Vernon, are you seeking recognition? Could
yes,
we,
sir.
Ty, do you want to yield to Vernon for?
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
I have been through the system at the academy way back and not too long ago. Again, the newer system, I think, that they have at the academy. I probably killed a couple of people and a couple of people killed me. Was it that kind of interactive system? And I was wondering if Officer Brewer, who's at the academy, based on what you were explaining, what the differences might be.
Vernon, thank you. I was going to ask Kate to comment after Ty finished
Okay,
his remarks.
thank you.
So Ty, if you want to go ahead and finish, and then I think you were about to ask Lori, who had accompanied you, if she had anything further she wanted to contribute. Is that correct?
Yes, I wanted to ask Lori, get an assessment from her as to what her thoughts were, and maybe there's something that she saw that I did not.
We finished, Ty?
Yes, right now I yield to Lori, yes.
Very good. Thank you, Ty. Lori?
Okay, well, it was certainly an impressive system, and I was impressed by how flexible it was in terms of creating different scenarios and having the person running the system reacting to what the officer was doing to make it more realistic as to what might happen on the street. I do think that it would be of value to be a little more analytical about the information they're collecting from how the officers are reacting to the scenarios. What kind of scenarios seem to result in officers having more difficulty in de-escalating the situation. I think that keeping track of the color of the person who is, you know, the perpetrator perpetrator of whatever, and how those reactions may change in relation to officers. I really think that they're not being analytical enough about it. I mean, on the surface, it looks very effective. So I don't want to take away from that, but I think they could learn more about it and over time be somewhat smarter perhaps about the way they run the scenarios to make them even more of a challenge for people getting the training. My other thing was that it cost $65,000 for this system, and evidently these things are constantly getting upgraded software that can do more and more stuff. So it does, and there are competitors. So it does seem like if the county were going to buy a system like this, it would be important for them to really do their homework. And if there are systems that, you know, sort of come with the next upgrade and the next upgrade and the next upgrade, you know, that would be a good idea. The other thing is that it sounds like, I mean, obviously they're training a lot of people at the state police training center, but it sounds like there's a lot of downtime for this equipment. And it's not only the, you know, the computer itself, but you need to, you know, set up a room to be able to use the equipment in appropriately. So there's a space consideration as well. So if there's downtime for this equipment, I couldn't help but wonder why it couldn't be shared across various police organizations rather than every police organization in the state going to buy their own. So,
Lori, thank you. Thank you very much. Are there other commissioners who have questions for Ty or Lori about what they saw last week before we call on Sergeant Brewer? I have a couple of questions for Ty and Lori. Could you say, you've described that there's some equipment in some room. Could you describe what the actual components of the system are? Ty, you said there's a tablet. I take it that there is a camera, and is that the camera affiliated with the tablet, or are there other cameras or multiple cameras that are viewing the officer who is responding?
Yes, what it is, say, for example, if you take like a common laptop and you would be in a different room, for example, and a room adjacent to the officer that is being trained. Now, the controller of the computer or laptop is a training officer, him or herself. And what the system does, it allows you to see the officer's response to the subject in the virtual reality world. And the officer, the training officer, can adjust his or her response through the subject to whatever that officer says or does. So it's really a real world scenario, and they're responding in real time. Now, to answer, double back and answer, or bring light to one of the questions that Lori kind of had in terms of assessment. I spoke with Sergeant Brewer, Sergeant Brazil, our host today. And he said what they do after they complete the training, particularly if it's a scenario where an officer has not done particularly well, they go over that scenario and they question the officer as to his or her behaviors, their statements, and if they find it lacking in terms of them being able to articulate a reason for how they responded, then they send them back through, again, additional scenarios that may be similar to see how they respond after going back in the system again. So they are looking to capture information and data, and one of the key aspects is trying to get a clear understanding of what the officer was thinking, which is really what the officer is going to have to explain in a given court situation, should they end up shooting someone or what have you.
So Ty, if, you haven't said it explicitly, but I'm trying to imagine that the officer who is being trained is wearing like a virtual reality goggle over their face.
Yes.
So they're seeing essentially an entire scenario through the goggles,
Yes.
and they have an electronic weapon that is holstered to mimic their firearm, and the statements that they make are also then recorded. And so the training officer watching on the laptop is able to see the officer in the virtual reality scenario, and is able to hear is able to hear both what is being said by the subject in the scenario and the officer who's being trained. And they're able to record, do they record that for later analysis, or do they simply take notes? You're not sure.
Right. Well, they didn't tell us that they recorded it, but that was a part of the debrief, which Sergeant Brazil talked to me about today. And the reason they debrief right away is while the scenario is fresh in the mind of the officer and them. But your characterization of how the system works is spot on. And you go into this virtual reality world, and the training agent can see all of your movements, and they can respond through voice and action in real time with the subject based on what the officer says and does.
And the scenarios then, how long might a training scenario be in terms of sort of, let me just ask that question, and then I'll recognize Robin for his question. How long might a typical scenario be?
Well, I don't think that there's a set time frame, because the training officer, with the exception of the officers or the Maryland State Police's obligation to get the officers through the training itself. That was one of the logistical issues, how much time they would have. So the training scenarios have to be in line with whatever anticipated time they feel like they have in order to put each and every officer, say, for example, in a given class through that training. And that number could vary a bit based on what scenarios are presented, because the officers are not necessarily given the same scenario, which is one of the benefits of the system.
Ty, thank you. Robin?
Yeah, just to make sure I'm talking, just to sort of come back a little bit to Laurie's point, which I appreciated. I wonder if, it's not really on the Montgomery County training staff to do the data analysis that she was looking for. This is something to see whether the state training staff are doing that and are collecting sufficient data. I'm not suggesting that this data be published. I think it would be difficult and potentially counterproductive, but I do wonder whether they are actually using data and analytic tools to figure out questions of implicit bias, for example. I think that this would be a controlled situation in which one might find answers to those questions. So maybe Ms. Brewer can shed some light on that.
Did Kate, we see that you're present. Welcome this evening, and we welcome your comments and reaction.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, I can't have my video on. I'm actually getting over an illness, and I don't think anybody needs to see me right now. So, but I appreciate it. Sorry,
thank you very much for coming.
I actually had to catch up on some stuff at work because I was off last week, so I apologize for being late. So, so I agree. There was with what Ty says a lot about how intuitive the system is. I did talk to Sergeant Brendan Johnston, who was one of the ones that was there from Montgomery County that was also there to look at the system. And Vernon, to your point, comparing it to what we have now, it really is no comparison. It's far above what we currently have. It's definitely superior to the system that we currently have. And again, there's, as was said, there's likely with VR and how computers and technology is advancing, it will continue to advance, and hopefully upgrades in the system is something you can just upload or download or however, whatever it is that system takes. My question would be if there's a cost to that, but that's something outside my pay grade. As far as if there's a new upload, new download for new system information. I agree that VR should be something that complements what we're currently doing. It should be an additional training to what we currently do, especially when we get into practical venues. I think it's absolutely, because you don't need, as to Mr. McKinney's point, it doesn't need that many officers to run. Now, logistically, it needs quite a large space to run. So we're talking about a double classroom. So, but again, I mean, logistics is always going to be an issue for everything. That's just the reality of training and training venue and spaces. But it could definitely be used to supplement. Now, just on a side note, to say we could put everybody through, there is a population that has a very difficult time wearing those VR goggles, and just their equilibrium is so off on it. So I would be careful saying, and I'm not saying anybody's suggesting this, but it's just something we have talked about a lot as a staff, making it a mandatory section of training, which is why I think it should absolutely be a complement and additional training. And the things that a lot of these VR systems can do is just consistently advancing as more technology advances come. But again, as far as getting the systems, that's way beyond my pay grade, but I absolutely see this department going to something like that. And there's quite a few benefits to it.
Kate, thanks very much. Are there other commissioners who have other questions about this virtual reality training program that Ty and Lori were able to see? We welcome you to take the opportunity to ask about this.
I heard what Kate was saying about the
And then you're recognized.
putting on the those virtual things. I've never put them on. I've never done that. I see the kids and everybody with games and everything, but I can understand why it could impact a person's spatial, being able to handle it. I could just remember as a kid having with those little 3D things where you put a disc in and you click it and it popped out. That was enough right there. But it would be interesting. I'm sorry I wasn't able to be there to see it, but like I said, in the present system that we had, it was a big screen, and people popped out from behind walls and stuff. And I guess over a period of time, you get acclimated to that kind of stuff. But it was then even for me, you had to think. I mean, the split-second decisions that they have to make, depends on that person's ability, or at the present time that they face those kinds of situations. So,
thank you, Vernon. Right, I was not in the classroom when the Citizens Academy session of that was held. I was watching by Zoom, and I was struck, by, I think the issue essentially was you are confronting someone who probably has a firearm, that it was it had the quality in some sense, the particular scenario that I remember seeing at the Citizens Academy was sort of a kind of who's going to draw first at the OK Corral. That struck me then as a very unrealistic and dangerous scenario to reinforce as a way of thinking about this. And one of the things that Ty mentioned is that the scenario concludes with either the officer placing the subject in handcuffs or calling for medical treatment because the subject has been injured. And I thought to myself as Ty was speaking that potentially another kind of scenario conclusion could be calling for crisis emergency response. That there could be, that there could be conceivably, if we're thinking about de-escalation, other alternatives that might be ones that could conclude satisfactorily a confrontation like that. So that was at least a reaction I had to what Ty and Lori sort of described seeing. Christina, Ruhama, any questions or observations at this point?
Not any at this moment. Thank you for asking.
Ruhama and Christina, you may know that I know, Ruhama, I don't know, have you had an opportunity to participate at all in the Citizens Academy?
Yes, I've joined a couple meetings.
Okay, very good. Christina, at some point, someone will explain to you that one of the requirements for service, if it hasn't been explained already, I see Susan nodding her head, is to participate in the Citizens Academy. And I think I'll speak for all of us who've had some exposure to it, that there was a very interesting and in many respects, and insightful about sort of the operations of the MCPD. Are there other questions or comments regarding the virtual reality training from Ty, from Lori, from Kate Brewer?
Mr. Chairman,
Ty?
while they're thinking about that, I would really like to communicate to Captain Brewer that I'm going to be looking at some other systems. And after speaking with Brendan Johnston, who was the Montgomery County Police Department representative there with us on Thursday, I would really like to coordinate with him in terms of timing where we can continue to view these systems together. And I would like, if possible, to get an assessment, a written assessment of his opinion on the system, so that we can evaluate that as well.
Ty, that sounds very good. Is there, I don't know, I imagine that in federal procurement or in government procurement, there are sort of templates for evaluation of training programs, of software programs that might be useful, sort of setting out a set of criteria that you could use for ranking this system in comparison to others in terms of what the attributes are, the technical requirements, and so on, to perhaps facilitate the kind of comparison you want to do.
Well, I think one of the things that's going to be germane, Mr. Chairman, is speaking to police departments that already have these systems operational. That's where you're going to get the best feedback.
Sure.
It's going to be very difficult otherwise, because they're relatively new still. There's probably not a lot of historical data in terms of how effective they've been in terms of training people on the street. I don't know if that data yet is readily available, but I'm sure the knowledge that we can glean from departments that are already utilizing them in their training and the commentary and feedback that they're getting from their officers would certainly be germane to our assessment.
Very good. Is there, I think we're ready to, if there's nothing else, we're ready to move on to another item on the agenda. Very good. Ty, Lori, thank you very much. I think this was certainly informative and hopefully will be productive and supportive for the department in expanding their training alternatives. It was not on the agenda, but one of our responsibilities, of course, every month is to review the minutes of the prior meeting, in this case, the Monday, October 10 meeting. And after reviewing them, if they are satisfactory, vote to approve them. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes of Monday, October 10? That was the meeting in which Captain Erme spoke to us about the 2021 use of force report.
Mr. Chair, I move acceptance of the minutes subject to any corrections.
I second that.
I'd like to speak to the motion before we vote, which is that I noticed that in the reporting of the participation of the Policing Advisory Commission, their individual members of the commission were not identified in terms of asking questions or making comments in the course of the questioning of Captain Erme. And so one would be really kind of left in the dark about what the commissioners actually did or said. And if the staff were able then to capture the actual participation of the members of the commission, I think that might make the minutes more valuable to the general public. With that, the question is on the adoption of the amendments. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Or aye, or raise your hand. Anybody voting? Okay. Christina and Ruhama. Ruhama's hand go up. Christina, we're waiting for your vote. Or you can vote no or abstain since you weren't present.
She voted aye. She's in the chat.
Okay, very good. Motion carries. I'd like to. So at this point, the question would be what new business we might have, and I think something that's not on agenda but is a matter of somewhat urgent business is the question of our annual meeting, our annual public meeting and forum. Does staff have any information about potential timing or location for this? I know that we had discussed this a little bit in a prior meeting or two. Are there any developments regarding that we might consider?
So we could set it up to be either virtual or in person. I'm not quite sure how easy it would be to do hybrid, but I can check. I had mentioned before partnering with regional services centers to provide additional outreach to residents in the community. I'm happy to reach out to I've already talked to several of them, but I'm happy to reach out formally to see if that's something they're interested in and would be able to help. They have the ability, they've got, mailing lists already of people that they interact with on a regular basis. We can put out a press release at the council regarding this, and we can access our own mailing list to try to publish it, as well as request that council members publish it in their newsletter to their constituents.
Well, I'm glad we'll be able to do that piece of it. That, of course, is important. I think the primary question would be what kind of theme, if any, or question we would want to pose. Robin, I see your hand.
Sorry, this is about just to alert you that I have another piece of new business after this one.
Okay, very good. Thank you. How much time would you like, roughly?
About 1 minute.
Oh, very good. Okay, so I had when this issue had been raised a month or two ago, had proposed a possibility of the role of traffic enforcement or the subject of traffic enforcement as a potential theme for the meeting. Friends probably are aware that on October 25th, the Office of Legislative Oversight for the Council submitted another report analyzing data regarding police traffic stops by the MCPD. And their conclusions were that there was still substantial disparity in racial disparity in the way in which traffic enforcement is taking place. And they had data regarding citations and what the subjects were and so forth. And so I think that a key issue in sort of addressing racial disparity in the policing has been one approach to say, let us have the police de-emphasize policing. Let's have perhaps a specialized non-criminal enforcement traffic enforcement approach that had been discussed at the county council. State law delegates to the police, however, traffic enforcement duties. The other side of it is the question of traffic safety. We're aware of pedestrian deaths, we're aware of motor vehicle deaths, and I had alluded to my own purely impressionistic sense that I see lots of dangerous driving in the course of my own driving around, and wondering to what extent, if we're not going to, what are the ways in which we can improve driver safety other than through enforcement, if there are such things. And so I suspected that given the observation of the OLO, that the principal relationship or principal interaction, I should say, between the police and the public is in the context of traffic enforcement, this might be an appropriate subject to hear from the public about their concerns, and to perhaps as well hear from the OLO about what kinds of alternatives or their alternatives or recommendations for improving traffic enforcement regarding racial equity. So I throw that out as a proposed topic to the commission for comment as a matter of new business. I recognize Robin.
Thank you. Two thoughts on that. I think if you're going to do a public meeting, I don't think you should have a OLO come to that. I think the public meeting should be for the public. I think it's fine to have OLO come and talk to us. That would be great. It would inform what we do. But it's easy for a kind of hybrid event to spend all of its time on OLO. And I don't think we should do that. So in general, I like the idea of doing traffic enforcement. Obviously, I think it's an area that we've done a lot of work in, and where we have a number of very concrete recommendations to offer, which we've already sent to the council. And I think it's appropriate for us to sort of stand up in public and say, this is what we have recommended in the past, and we need to hear from the community about whether this is an approach that they want to hear. So I would support it and focus on community, using it as community connection and outreach.
Robin, thank you. Vernon, you're recognized.
Yes, sir. I'm just hoping that whatever kind of public meeting we have is not the normal old public meeting where people come and tell you that they were only doing 10 miles over the speed limit. And they got pulled over, or that this was the first time that they had a light out and the police pulled them over and told them they had a light out. And I think that was what I saw in the last one that we had. What was it, a year or so or more ago? And I'd just like to see us glean some positive themes out of the meeting, rather than just an opportunity for people to blow off steam.
Vernon, thank you. Other thoughts? Are there other thoughts about our response, how we can carry out our responsibility to have a public forum? Is there a motion? Go ahead, Lori.
Okay. I was not at any other forums since I'm relatively new, so I don't know how they've been before. But you know, I agree with Vernon that we don't want just people to come in and complain about their individual situations with a traffic stop. Is it possible to have a series of potential options of different ways to treat traffic enforcement, you know, with some kind of structure around them, and asking for opinions about those various ways, as opposed to having people just come in and tell their specific circumstance. You know, as I said, I have not been at other forums, so I don't know exactly how these work. So, but maybe having some things on the agenda that are specifically items to discuss and ask for pros and cons, recommendations, etc.
Lori, thank you. If I may respond, I think that what you've laid out more specifically about alternative ways to carry out traffic enforcement was what I had envisioned the open might do, and it's not necessarily, you know, as Robin said, you know, they may not be the right ones in terms of their particular reporting. Robin has, you know, on behalf of the commission, prepared some excellent reporting on data and you know, and I think his, you know, perhaps a public presentation of that in some context. We had a forum on drug policy that was not widely attended there, and there were individuals who came, you know, who made complaints. There were also people who came to praise the police at that particular event as well. I don't know how constructive it was for us as a commission, but I think that there is value for the public to feel that there is a place where they can, as Vernon put it, blow off steam about their interactions with the police. That in some sense, you know, such a forum is, you know, in some sense, the only official opportunity where residents of the county could say, you know, I'm not filing I've filed a formal complaint, and my formal complaint got, you know, thank you, not founded. I want to reiterate it, or, you know, that, you know, I mean, we can obviously, these presentations were time limited. It was not, you know, nobody carried on a filibuster or monopolized that forum. And I would be willing to, I personally would be willing to hear people who were doing that in the hopes that we heard, in the hopes that we gave the community an opportunity to speak at a public forum, and that we ideally heard a sufficient breadth of comments, that there were positives as well as, you know, that there were constructive comments to make aside from simply complaints. Are there other questions on whether or not, on the particular sort of suggestion? I'm about to ask if there is a motion that we have that we try to arrange our public forum on the subject of traffic enforcement, is there a motion that we do that? And then we,
Yes, I'll make a motion that we do that.
is there a second to Robin's motion that we make traffic enforcement?
I'll second it.
I'm sorry, who spoke?
I'll second it.
Aye.
Aye.
Ty, I'm sorry, Ty, I didn't see the green box around your, I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah.
Very good. Ty seconds. So does anybody want to speak on this amendment, on this motion? Does anybody have any questions on this before we vote? Lori,
I'm good.
Also,
Good.
Vernon. Your hand's up.
yes, isn't some of that the job of Bishop Walker's group?
Well, we've already done the work, Vernon, so they can build on it if they want.
As long as, Vernon, if I may respond, I mean, that organization is, in the process of just getting started. They've got a whole lot of kinds of things to do. We have a responsibility in our charter to hold a public forum. That is a duty that the county council entrusted to us until, if the county council decides they don't want to continue our commission after July, they certainly could do that. But I think that we should, I think that we should have a public forum. Did you want to propose an alternative subject before we vote?
No.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on the motion that we have a public forum on traffic enforcement? If not, the question occurs on the amendment. All members in favor vote aye or raise your hand.
Raise my hand.
Lori, Eric, Ruhama, Ty, Robin. How does Christina vote? And Christina, you can also vote in the chat.
I'm voting nay, Mr. Chair.
I'll get to the nays in a moment. Susan, would you prefer we vote in the chat? Would that be better for the record?
I'm gonna have to defer to Logan and Nazifa if they can record the votes or not.
It would be a little bit easier if everyone is able to use the chat.
Then,
Thank you.
okay, okay. Okay, and so looking in the chat, I apologize, everyone. I see Ty, Ruhama, myself voting yes, Robin voting yes, Lori and Christina, we're waiting for your votes. And if you want to vote nay, you can vote nay. Vernon is recorded as nay. So it looks like Christina is abstaining. Is that your choice, Christina?
She may have just dropped off.
So on this motion, it's 5 yes, 1 no, 1 not voting. Thank you, everyone. So now let's, Robin, did you want to be recognized?
Just to bring up another.
Robin, before I want to get to your business, I want to conclude then the question of the forum. We need to identify a date and if possible, a subcommittee that can work with staff in putting this together. Susan, are there any particular dates that you would be particularly poor from a staff and logistics point of view, recognizing the end of the year and the holidays and so forth?
The 29th and the 6th are not good because those are council transition dates. I'll have to get back to you on the other ones. You might want to consider your next regular December meeting as a possible date.
That would be December 12th, correct?
I think so. Hold on just a second. Yes.
Okay, what is there? So we will, how do folks feel about sort of making December 12th a date in which you would attempt to do this? This would be a Monday night. Presumably we do it at the same hour, 6:30 to 8.
Do we have enough time to do the outreach you were talking about?
If, Susan, what do you think? I mean, if we made a decision by the end of this week, further about sort of the program, is that something where an announcement could go out, and would 3 weeks be sufficient? Or is that, Robin, you feel that would be insufficient time?
Well, it would be nice to get the council members on board with this. They're doing a transition at the moment.
Yes.
I expect this will be very low down their list of priorities. and so I honestly think that this will be easier to do in the new year rather than trying to rush it through now.
Okay. That's
The
very
new
helpful.
council will be in place. The new council goes in on the 5th of December, I believe, so.
Yeah, I know they'd be there, but you know, they got to be thinking about other stuff. I don't think that they would be very enthused, so.
It would be, I think, useful, however, if we begin to think about what a date would be, our next
Sure.
meeting would be January 9th, if I'm correct.
Yeah, that's fine. That would be better.
Is other members of the commission have any view on the idea of January 9 as a target date? Are there, who would like to serve on the sort of committee to sort of plan and execute this particular task of the forum? I'm willing, of course. Robin, okay. Anybody else?
I'm willing to help.
Okay, Lori, excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we've got a subcommittee of 3. Did anybody else have any sort of comments, questions, or observations on this matter before we get to the other new business from Robin? Very good. Robin, you're recognized.
Yeah, just a short thing. We received the draft audit from the audit group before the last meeting, and we had a discussion during the meeting about some of the some problems with the draft document, especially data problems, but also some tone issues and some sort of missing perspectives. I think this is something that we should write up, and we should write into a letter, and it should go to the executive and the county council and to the audit group. We have a start on that already, and I would be happy to draft such a letter for us to discuss at the next meeting. So if the commission believes that we should do that, then I'm happy to provide everyone with the draft before the next meeting, so that we can have something that we can vote on at the next meeting.
Is there a motion that Robin draft a letter for the commission to consider regarding the draft EL4A audit?
Yes, I agree.
Time moves. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Lori seconds. Is there discussion on the proposal that Robin draft a letter regarding the draft audit to be sent to council and so on? Sergeant Brewer, go ahead, please.
Yeah, sorry, just, and I know you guys know this because you are referring to it as a draft, but since that's not the final, I don't know, or are you just trying to get in front of it?
Yeah.
And maybe, okay, that's, okay. Yep, that makes sense. Gotcha.
Kate, thanks very much for that clarification. That's very useful. Further questions on the, or comments on the amendment, on the motion? Please indicate in, we'll now vote. Please indicate in the chat whether you're an aye or a nay or an abstain.
Mhm.
Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I see 7 ayes. I see no noes. I see no abstentions. The motion carries. Robin, thank you very much for bringing this up and for volunteering to do that. Is there anything else that is old business or new business? Susan, is there anything that is outstanding? Are there reports from the county that we are waiting to get back?
We just have the PAC's annual report that we have to finish up.
Okay,
The council, they have a firearms report, but it's not really directly related to policing so much, but I'm happy to circulate that with you. That's just about weapons in general, particularly after the Supreme Court decision that impacts concealed carry. So
I think all of us would be interested in
Okay.
seeing that. That would be, I think, very instructive.
okay, I'll circulate that.
Susan, thank you. Anything else before we adjourn? Well, Christina, thank you very much. Welcome again. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I present a motion to return.
Second.
Robin moves to adjourn, Vernon seconds. All those in favor say aye.
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 We are
Aye.
adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone, and we will reconvene on December 12th. Thank you.
Okay, thank
Good
you.
night. Have a
Bye.
good holiday, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, staff, very much.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Have a good night.
Glad to do it. Thank you.
Okay.
And do we-
Susan, stop recording.
Oh yeah, I should do that, shouldn't I? At least I remember to start this time.